Good morning. Let your culture of safety line team. Partnership, nationwide partnership of like-minded folks that are coming together to foster the line team and working together. Just real quick, 15,000 plus partners at this point after close to 3.5 years from inception with Mr. Danny Rains. Electric systems grounding, which is really good. If you don't have that, you must get it. So we have next month will be Rod Courtney will be coming in again, his fourth presentation. So you need to get all Mr. Rod's, and then I'll be talking about the energy wheel reinvented. I came up with this about a year ago, but now it's rolling, and we have these that you could obtain. They're 3 wheels in a wheel, and I'll be explaining the energy wheel reinvented next month. Rod comes in the 23rd. I'll be talking about this on the 24th of July. So hope everybody's doing well. It's a nice day in South Carolina. It's getting a little warm, summertime, but thank goodness we got a little breeze, so it's doable. And Mr. Matt Edmonds with SET Solutions, he's joining us today. Matt came in about a year ago talking about, does anyone have any questions? Encouraging people to speak up. If you don't have that one, just email me, Brent@bierermeters.com, and get it, okay? He does a wonderful job. I like Mr. Matt. He's great as far as training, communication, leadership skills. But the one thing about Matt that I really like is not only his passion, his genuineness, but also he's so positive. And as a leader and communicating with one another out in the field and at our service centers and things like that, we got to keep a positive attitude. Just forget negativity. And Matt, you'll see. Today, he's going to be speaking on what do you expect, how expectations, and I like this, or lack of, okay, influence behaviors. So this is going to be a good one for today. Mr. Matt. Thank you, Matt.
Absolutely, man. I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Brent.
Thank you. So Matt's been traveling all around the country earlier this week, and he got in about 1:30 in the morning from doing some training up in New York area. And we appreciate you coming here, your fortitude. Okay, brother?
Happy to be here, man. Happy.
Well, tell us a little bit about Mr. Matt, your live line story, your live wire story, how you came into this industry.
So I honestly got blessed and just fortunately fell into this industry. So Pam Tompkins, years and years ago, gave me an opportunity out of school and said, hey, you want a job? And I said, sure, I'll do that. I never really had any dreams or aspirations of doing what I'm doing right now. But I started doing it, started enjoying it, and here I am over 20 years later.
Wow.
So
Isn't that crazy?
you know, I've never done actual line worked with a lot of utilities, but I've been able to learn a lot of stuff from a lot of folks that are out there. So those folks that know me know I ask a lot of questions. So I try to get in people's heads and see what's going on.
So 20 years ago, what? You were young.
Yeah. 20 years ago was a long time ago.
What happened?
When that number comes out of my mouth, it sounds crazy.
It is. So, Matt, tell us a little bit about SET Solutions and the services you all provide around the country.
Sure, yeah. So SET Solutions is a full-service safety consulting company. Our bread and butter, so to speak, is the electric power industry. We get the opportunity to work with utilities all across the country. We get to work with co-ops, municipals, investor-owns, contractors, all different types of folks. We work with some other types of industries as well, but our bread and butter is the electric power industry. And we do things like program development, assessments, training, anything we can do to help folks. And that's our main goal, is to try to help people as best we possibly can.
Yeah. And they must be good at it because, man, I know from knowing Matt for several years now and Miss Pam Tompkins for several years now. In fact, many of you all don't know, but Walter Beer, the owner of bierermeters, he used to work with, as loss control vice president and safety, he used to work with electric cooperatives of South Carolina, and Pam Tompkins did too, back in the early 90s and late 80s. Did you know that?
I did know that.
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is wild how it's coming full circle here in South Carolina, and SET Solutions and bierermeters is basically sharing with you something that doesn't cost you all nothing, and that's what Mr. Matt's going to bring to you today. And Matthew, appreciate it, brother.
Absolutely,
Okay?
my friend.
Appreciate
Thank you
it.
so much.
Yeah, man.
I'm looking forward to it. What's going on, y'all? So if you can't tell, I'm pretty excited to be here. I'm pretty excited to get an opportunity to share some information with you. My hope, my goal after our little bit of time together is we all leave here a little bit challenged and we all leave here a little bit encouraged. Because like I said earlier, the goal of all of this stuff is to try to get better at whatever it is that we do. And this topic that I'm going to talk to y'all today about, I firmly believe it's not just an at-work thing. This is one of those things that's just good as far as life skills go. Because we have these expectations out there, and every single one of us have some expectations every single day, no matter whether it's you're going through a drive-through or you go to a grocery store or whatever it is, you've got some expectations of some sort that's out there. And so our expectations a lot of times can drive other people's behaviors, and we can influence other people. And like we said, and like Brent kind of echoed earlier, our lack of expectations oftentimes can also drive behaviors. And we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about that. I'm pretty excited to do this. But remember, the ultimate goal of this is to be a little bit challenged, to be a little bit encouraged as we kind of move through this. So I want to kick this off. If any of you have ever seen me speak or heard me speak, you know I ask a lot of questions. And so I like kicking this off with just a pretty simple question. I want you to take just a second and think about, what are expectations? Right? So what are these things called expectations? We've all heard of them. We've all said this before. But an expectation is really something that we have a strong feeling that this will occur. We have a strong feeling that this will occur. And so I got an example for you, all right? So I'm going to compare and contrast two things. If you were to go through the drive-through at a fast food restaurant that has this big M out front, probably know what I'm talking about. And then you went through the drive-through restaurant at another place that has chick in the name, right? Do you have different expectations for those two different places? Right? Do you have some different ideas on, hey, here's what I expect when I go through this one versus when I go through that one? Like, we all have expectations for a lot of things, and then sometimes when our expectations aren't met, we get kind of disappointed, right? So we got to make sure that we understand what those expectations are. And we also really need to understand, as far as safety goes, what role does expectations play in this thing called safety? And so I got a little graphic that I like to put up here. I've used this for a long time because I feel like it does a really, really good job of illustrating safety and honestly why safety doesn't work sometimes for us. So let me unpack this for you, and let me tell you exactly what it is that we're looking at and what we're going through. So I think we would all agree that, like, in life, no matter what we're doing, we could be at home, we could be at work, we could be driving down the road, there's danger, right? Like, danger is a real thing. It doesn't take very long. You get behind the wheel of your car or your truck, you figure out danger's a real thing. Like, danger's real. And so what we need to do is we say, well, we have safety because danger exists, and safety goes in the opposite direction of danger, right? Like, if you look at my graph right here, safety's moving in that opposite direction of that danger. Now, here's a little bit of a challenge with that. Because what can happen sometimes, and I may be one of the only safety people that's going to say this, but hey, could you be too safe? Right? Could you be too safe? And what I mean by that when I say being too safe is, well, that arrow that says safety there, it can keep going and going and going and going and going and going. But in reality, we understand, like, at some point we have to do things and we have to get work done and we have tasks that need to occur. And I mean, in reality, if we never want anybody to get hurt at work again, well, the foolproof way to make sure that happens is don't come to work, right? Because if nobody comes to work, you can't get hurt. But we understand that's not a realistic expectation. So what we do through the lens of safety is we put these expectations out there for safety on, this is how we're going to do work. These are the proper procedures. This is the training we're going to get. We're going to wear PPE, whatever it is. Like, we put this stuff in place, and that's what you're looking at right here. And I'm going to refer to this as the green line. All right. So this green line is really important because what this green line does is it keeps you and me away from this stuff down here. It keeps us away from the hazards, the threats, the dangers, the real things that are out there that really hurt real people. And so what we want to try to do is we want to try to create somewhat of a buffer space in here. That's the reason why this green line doesn't sit right down here. It creates a little bit of a buffer space to help keep us safe because, hey, we know we're all people and we might make mistakes. And so we're going to put clear expectations on how stuff needs to be done. Now, here's the thing with that. I think we all know and understand sometimes expectations don't get met, especially when it comes to safety. And so I have a few examples of what that could potentially look like. So what I want to do is I want to throw up an expectation. These are probably something that all of you have seen at some point in time when it comes to safety. And then I may give you an example of where it's maybe not being met. So here's one super basic example. How about this thing called housekeeping? All right. If you've been in the business for any length of time, you have probably heard somebody bring up the term housekeeping, right? And so housekeeping, here's an expectation for you. All work areas kept free of accumulation of materials, kept neat, clean, orderly, and in a sanitary condition. You probably have something like that in a safety manual somewhere. Probably got that expectation, all right? So here's an example. What do you think? Is that's good, right? Like that's an expectation of housekeeping, but we put it in the book. So, okay, so that's probably not very good, right? Like we're gonna agree that does not look very good. So we got an expectation not being met here for some housekeeping. Now, let's move on to another one. Let's get another example, all right? How about this one? Excavations, because I know a lot of folks in here do a lot of excavation work, do a lot of digging in the dirt. So here's a super basic thing, and this is actually an OSHA regulatory requirement, all right? So if you're going to be working in a hole in the ground that's 5 feet deep or more, OSHA regulatory body says you have to. There's no negotiating here. You have to put some sort of protective system in the ground. All right, we got an expectation. We got a couple of folks here. And they're in a hole about 8 feet deep down in the ground, and the reality is like there's no protective system that's really here. And here's the thing, like that when I look at a picture like this, and I took this picture, so I know I had a little bit of conversation with these folks. These two guys aren't folks that don't know what they're doing, right? They are literally in the dirt every day when they come to work. And usually in the line of work that they do, they're about 15, 20 feet deep down in the ground. That would not be uncommon for them. But on this day, this was taken on a Friday afternoon. This day they were doing something a little bit out of the norm. And so, hey, we know we've got that out there, but I think it'll be okay this time. So we got another example of expectations maybe not being met. And I got a couple more for you. All right. How about this one? Ladders. Do you ever use a ladder? Have you ever seen a ladder? All right. So you know what I mean when I say ladders. All right. So help you get up off the ground. All right. So I'm fairly confident that somewhere, if you have a safety manual at your company, somewhere in that safety manual, it's going to have a little sentence that says something like this. All ladders will be inspected prior to use. And you're going to get ones that don't work out of service. Fair enough? All right. What do you think? See anything that might not be quite right here? Hey, and in this picture, give you a little bit of background. I was with a foreman, and I asked him before I ever showed him this. I was like, "Hey, question for you: Do your folks inspect their ladders?" What do you think he said? Oh yeah, we inspect their ladders. All right. How often do you do that? Every day, man. We do that every day. And I said, "All right, well, can we show you something?" When's the last time you think that ladder was inspected? Because I'm fairly confident it didn't get looking like that since yesterday. And this is another one of those examples, and I'm not trying to pick on people at all, but this is another one of those examples sometimes where expectations aren't met. And I got one more example for you, especially for those folks in the electric power industry. You understand the importance of your arc-rated clothing. You understand the importance that if you are ever in an arc flash event, like you want that clothing to do what it's supposed to do to help keep you safe, so you don't get extremely burned in those events. And so with that in mind, one of the expectations we're going to have is arc-rated clothing has to be maintained to ensure that it's going to do what we think it's going to do. So I got a picture for you. All right. Now, you may be seeing some stuff that don't look quite right, but I'm going to blow that up for you. Anybody see anything that not quite right here? Like maybe this massive hole? And again, Not standing up here trying to pick on anybody or point a finger at anybody and say, you shoulda, you shoulda, you shoulda. I think these are just all examples of we've got expectations, but sometimes expectations don't get met. And odds are you've got example after example after example of the exact same thing that's happened to us. So with all that in mind, like we said, the importance of having that green line, my next question that I want to follow up on that is, well, if we've got a green line and we understand why we have a green line, well, why aren't these expectations met all the time, right? Why don't people do the things that they're supposed to do every single time? And if you just think about that for a second, there's probably a few things that are going to pop into your head. And so I put together a few things that I want to spend a little bit of time and talk about on maybe why us just as people don't meet those expectations sometimes. And so here they are, all right? Here's the number one thing. And sometimes we skip right over this one. They don't exist. That's why I said earlier, the title of this presentation, or lack of. When we don't have clear expectations or any expectations, people just kind of make it up and do their own thing. So in our heads, we've got some expectations, right? Like, and it's probably happened to every single one of us at some point in time. In our head, there is this expectation, and then we're like, well, you shoulda, you shoulda, you shoulda, you shoulda. But in reality, well, I didn't really have a clear expectation for them. All right. So that's one of them. We're going to talk about that one here in a minute. Next thing is they're not enforced. So we got a green line, but we don't enforce the green line. Now, please hear me when I say this. When I say enforced, I know that word probably brings up some somewhat negative ideas, like you're thinking of like enforcement. Somebody's getting beat over the head with something. It's not at all what I'm talking about. Enforce just means people are holding each other accountable on what they're supposed to be doing. So folks, when we don't enforce things, you know, people don't meet that expectation. And then this last one we'll spend a little bit of time talking about here in a little bit too is, well, maybe we've got them, but they're not really clearly defined or clearly communicated, right? Like we've got them written down in a book somewhere, or maybe we sent somebody through some training at some point in time, but we haven't really done a good job of communicating to the folks that have to accomplish the task what the expectations are and how do I meet those expectations. So I figured we'd just take a few minutes. We're going to talk about these things, unpack them, and then maybe get some practical tips on, well, how can we get past this? Like, what are some strategies that we can put in place to hopefully ensure that those expectations do get met? Because the reality is, when we don't have good expectations, people's behaviors and how they do what they do might not necessarily be the right thing. That's why that green line is so important. So let's unpack the first one. They don't exist. All right, now, here's my little graph. Showed this to you earlier. But do you see something that's missing from this graph? Right? Something's missing. And it's the green line. There is no green line. See, here's the challenge with not having a green line. When we don't have the green line, well, we come up with our own ways to do stuff. Right? I can come up with a way to do this, and you can come up with a way to do this. And if there is no real clear expectations, who's right, who's wrong, we just do it our own way. The challenge with this, when we don't have clear expectations, is, as you can see, these two lines right here are getting real close to one another. And this is just kind of how we do what we do, and nothing bad has happened, and we haven't really had any major consequences or anything. So we just keep on doing it this way. And then maybe we even come up with a quicker, faster way to get it done and nobody gets hurt. So we keep doing it that way. And as you can tell, without this green line being here, these two lines are starting to get close to one another. And so when we don't have clear expectations, and unfortunately, y'all, like I mentioned earlier, you know, I'm blessed, I'm fortunate, I get to see a lot of different organizations. And part of that, unfortunately, has been having to come in after events or some significant injuries have happened to folks. And what you start to see is people have this expectation in their head, well, they should have done this, and they should have done this, and they should have been able to do this. And, you know, just ask the question, well, why do you say that? Like, why do you think that they should be able to do that? And the response a lot of times is, well, they've been doing this for 20 years, or they've been doing this for 15 years. They should have known better. But in reality, well, there was never any real clear expectation of, when you go out to do this work, this is how it needs to be done. And again, they've been doing it that way for a long time and nothing bad happened. So we just kind of assumed that everybody was good and everybody was safe. So that right there is why it is so important for us to have a green line, especially when folks are doing types of work that can get them really hurt or even worse. So don't exist. That's one of the reasons. All right. Here's the next thing. They are not enforced. They are not enforced. And I mentioned this earlier, enforcement doesn't mean somebody's out there beating somebody over the head with something. But when we have that green line, what we do a lot of times is just us as people, we can always come up with the good reason why it's okay for me not to do that. Right? I know what I'm doing. I've been doing this for a long time. That applies to people. That doesn't apply to me though. Hey, and I'm going to give you an example that I'm fairly confident every single one of us have fallen into. And I'm gonna bring up something. So if you get behind the wheel of your vehicle and you get out on the road, you're gonna pass these signs on the side of the road, and they're white and black, and they got numbers on them. You probably have figured out what I'm talking about, right? It's a speed limit sign. All right, now, just want you to think about this for a second. What's a speed limit? Like, what does that mean? And I know what some of you are thinking in your head. You're thinking, that's a suggestion, man. I mean, come on, that's what a speed limit is. This is a suggestion. As long as you're kind of close to whatever that number is, we're good. But in reality, just to remind you, in case you didn't know, those numbers are an enforceable regulatory law. Meaning, if you don't follow the law, you could receive a citation or a ticket of some sort. But here's the deal. We've all gotten real comfortable in a lot of situations not following the law because lack of consequences, right? Those lack of consequences kind of drive that behavior. So, I mean, I'm going to give you an example, and I'm fairly confident this is going to apply to you. If you're driving down an interstate, all right, or a highway, so where we're at right now here, we got I-77 real close to us. And on I-77 right here, the speed limit's 70 miles an hour. So if we get out there on I-77 and the speed limit's 70 miles an hour, and I were to set my cruise control to say, let's say 76 miles an hour, and I pass a state trooper or a highway patrol person sitting on the side of the road, what do you think's going to happen? Yeah, you're right. Probably nothing, right? Like, most likely nothing's going to happen. Now, why do I say that? Because we know and we've experienced that same thing. And in fact, so much so, we've got all these fun little sayings that go along with it, right? Like, 8 is great, 9 is fine, but 10 you're mine. Anybody ever heard those sayings before? And we think that way in our head. And so that perception of what our consequences are drives our behavior because, well, honestly, we're probably right. Until you drive through a small town. That same logic doesn't work there in the small towns, all right? So just so all of you know, if you're ever in the state of South Carolina and you're traveling to a place called Myrtle Beach and you drive to a little town called Ainer, slow down, all right? I'm giving you the PSA right now. You need to slow down, all right? But y'all know exactly what I'm saying, right? Like, when we experience that shapes our behavior. And because nobody's enforced the behavior, we just keep doing it this way, this way, this way, this way. And the challenge here is we just drift. This is a natural thing that you and me and just us as people do. Because we can always, and I mean always, rationalize why it's okay for me to do this. And in the same breath say, you can't though. You can't do that. But it's okay for me to do this. So we've got to understand, like, the green line's here for a reason, and we need to enforce that reason. And again, enforcement does not mean writing people up all the time and getting people in trouble. It's holding each other accountable and saying, hey, I care about you. I care about you enough to say, I want you to go home today. I don't want you to get hurt. That's the whole reason why the green line's there and it exists to start with. And so enforcement doesn't have to be the safety person doing the enforcement. Everyone on a team should have the responsibility to understand the role they play in helping keeping themselves and the people that they work with safe every single day. And so we've got to enforce that green line, because if we don't, people are just going to get real comfortable doing what they're doing. And y'all, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but the reality is every single bad event that I've had to investigate or analyze and break down, and I mean every one of them that I've been a part of, this was there. This was there. This drift thing was there. And unfortunately, people just got comfortable doing what they were doing. And, well, it was the day that these two lines hit each other. And it was bad. And I mean bad. Now, in addition to not being enforced, here's another real big challenge that comes with it. Not being clearly communicated. Because, again, we've got an expectation, but if we didn't communicate to our employees, I'll give you the example of this, and you think about this. Has this ever applied to you? If somebody gets hired on at your company, all right, first day on the job, never done this before, all right, they're probably going to go through some sort of an orientation process, I would imagine, right? And they're probably going to get some HR stuff, fill out some paperwork, and then there's another thing that most likely somebody's going to have to do, or somebody's experienced before. They're going to pull out this book, and it's a safety manual, all right? And that safety manual can be 200 pages long, 300 pages. I've seen from really thick safety manuals. But in a lot of those safety manuals, there's a very first page in it. And I don't know if y'all have ever seen this before, but the very first page is basically a page that says, I, Matt Edmonds, have read and understand everything in this book. And we put our name on there, we sign it, all right? And we've just literally been given 200 pages of stuff. And somebody spent 5 minutes going through it. Like, that's unrealistic to expect somebody to know everything that's in that book, but we do that sometimes because we throw it back there. Well, you signed the paper and you said that you understood it. But those expectations maybe didn't get clearly communicated. And going back to this idea too about clearly communicating those expectations, here's the challenge and what happens sometimes. Assumptions will creep in. Assumptions will creep in. So, see, this is where the idea that all of us have said before of common sense comes in, right? Any of you ever thought of, oh man, that boy ain't got no common sense. I mean, they don't have common sense to fill in the blank. And the challenge with this is common sense, well, I think we can all agree, is not as common as we would like for it to be, right? However, common sense is always, and I do mean always, assumed. Anytime that we think somebody should have common sense to blank, it's assumed that they've got the ability to do that. And the challenge with that is we make a lot of assumptions based on what we know and what we've experienced and what we've seen, and we throw that on somebody else and say, well, you should be able to do that, and you should understand this, and you should know exactly what needs to be done and what this expectation is. And so assumptions play a big role in this not being clearly communicated to folks. And unfortunately, we didn't do a great job. So one thing I'm hoping that you remember, and if anybody's heard me say anything close to this, you've heard these words come out of my mouth. When we start talking about this idea of communication, there's a big difference in effective communication and communication. Effective communication equals mutual understanding. Effective communication equals mutual understanding. Meaning, we're on the same page, and I know we're on the same page. I'm not assuming that we're on the same page. But the challenge is, well, we make a lot of assumptions. Now, something I'll throw out there for you. So I was somewhere not too long ago, and these guys said, Matt, we got a perfect example for you. Perfect example. All right. So they said we had hired a fairly new employee, young kid, say 18 or 19 years old. And they asked him, we're going to say that his name was Bob. All right. We're going to say, Bob, can you help Tim back the truck up? Bob, can you help Tim back the truck up? Now, I just want you to think, when you hear those words, help Tim back the truck up, what pops in your head? Most likely what's popping in your head is like, yeah, it's the, hey, come on back, come on back, come on back, come on back, right? Like, we're going to be a spotter, all right? Now, Bob, on the other hand, didn't take it that way. Here's what Bob thought. Bob thought Tim needed help backing the truck up, like pushing the truck back. Now, just think about it for a second. He did exactly what he was told to do. Right? Exactly what he was told to do, helped Tim back the truck up, but he didn't do what was expected. Because the assumption was, oh, come on, man. I mean, why in the world would we need you to help him push a truck back? But again, it goes back to this common sense, because this is literally the first time Bob ever heard anybody say, help somebody back a truck up. And y'all probably have seen this. I've seen this across the country in the utility industry. How many folks coming into the field they don't know how to use a shovel or a pocket knife or a screwdriver? Like, is it the plus or the minus? Like, it's those type of things. And what we do is we say, well, how dumb do you have to be to not know how to do that? But the reality is they're not dumb and they're not stupid. They've just never done it before. I mean, somebody's not stupid that they can't use a shovel to dig a hole if they've never had a shovel in their hand to dig a hole. And what happens to a lot of us, just as people, is we put ourselves in their shoes, because that's what we're told to do. You need to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, see things from their perspective. But we do that with the mindset of, well, when I was 18 or 19 years old, I knew how to use a shovel. When I was 18 or 19 years old, I knew what it meant to help somebody back a truck up. I mean, for me personally, I probably can't remember a time in my life when I didn't know how to use a shovel. I'm sure I was digging holes in the backyard at 3 years old. So the challenge here is we're not all the same. And we've got to do a good job, if we want to be successful and effective leaders, of communicating what these expectations are. Because we can set people up for failure. And I got a good example for you, all right? I got a really good example for you, all right? So if you have a piece of paper and a pen there, if you don't, that's totally fine. You can do this in your head, all right? If you have a piece of paper and a pen there, here's something that I want you to do. I want you to draw me an elephant. Everybody seen an elephant? You know, an elephant's got a trunk, all right? It got big ears, all right? Pretty big animal. I want you to just think about it for a second. I want you to draw me an elephant. If you've ever been to the zoo, you've probably seen an elephant, all right? If you've ever seen any shows or anything about animals, they've probably shown you an elephant at some point in time, all right? So, you got it? Whether it's in your head or you drew it, you got your elephant? All right, now, what would you say if I told you this was my expectation for you? This is what you were supposed to draw. I'm curious. Did you do that? Really? You didn't do that. That's an elephant, right? Like, that's what an elephant looks like. I think everybody would look at that and say that's an elephant, but I'm pretty confident most folks aren't going to draw something that looks exactly like that, right? Why? Because you drew an elephant based on what you thought you needed to draw the elephant to look like. And here's what happens to us a lot of times. We do this same thing to people. We tell them, hey, do this. Hey, do this. I need you to do this. This is how this needs to be done. And we assume, because it makes sense to me, it should make sense to you. And a lot of times we say, I gave you everything you needed to get that done. I gave you the equipment. I gave you the tools. I gave you the training. You should be able to do all this stuff. But unfortunately, what happens sometimes is this whole elephant example. We don't draw the elephant the way that somebody expected us to draw an elephant. We drew the elephant the way we expected to draw an elephant. So we got to remember that if we want to do a good job of communicating clearly. So, a couple of practical tips that I just want to throw out there for all of us. So how do we get better? What are some of the things that we could potentially do to get in front of this idea of expectations not being met? Well, when we think about some strategies, I just want you to think about it for a second. I just mentioned one of them. I think one of the big things that you and me can do is we can clearly communicate expectations. And when I say clearly communicate expectations, here's something that we do a lot of times just as people when we think we've clearly communicated expectations. We ask a question. And here's the question. Y'all ready for this? Do you understand? Right? Do you understand? Or here's another one. Do you have any questions? They basically both mean the same exact thing. Now, here's the challenge with that, and I'm pretty confident every single one of us at some point in time have asked somebody those questions. Here's the challenge with it, though. if I ask someone, so in other words, like if I were to say, hey, Brent, do you understand this? And Brent shakes his head and he's like, yeah, I got it. I really don't know if Brent understands. All I know is Brent says he understands. So I want to encourage all of us to remember, do not mistake agreement for understanding. Don't mistake agreement for understanding. And what that means is somebody will shake their head and say, yes, I understand. I know. Now, there could be a couple reasons for that. One reason might be they think they got it. Let's go back to Bob helping back that truck up. Bob thought he got it. Bob thought he understood what he was supposed to do. So he's like, no, I don't have any questions. I got this. But also, sometimes people will say, I got it when they don't got it because they don't really feel comfortable saying, I don't understand. And if I don't understand, I'll just kind of figure it out as I go. Because last time I didn't understand something, you made me feel like an idiot for not understanding anything. So I'm not going to tell you I don't know now. We'll just figure it out kind of as we go on. And that goes into a whole other topic called psychological safety and making it safe for people to speak up and talk about things. But we got to make sure that we clearly communicate. And the way that we do that is we ask questions, specific questions, to ensure that we're on the same page. That's easy. It's super, super easy, but it takes a little bit of time. If we clearly communicate with people, we can get out in front of stuff happening and we can ensure that people do really understand what is our expectations, especially when it comes to this idea of safety, and not just leave it up to them to actually figure it out. Now, here's another thing that I want to throw out there. I want to go back to this idea of enforcement. And what are some strategies that we can do? I always like to tell folks one of the ways that we can influence people's behaviors is by tolerating stuff. So I say this, like as a leader, you're going to get what you tolerate, right? You are going to get what you tolerate. And so here's the challenge with the tolerate thing. It typically is going to make negative or not great behavior out of folks. And when I say not great behavior, I don't mean Johnny was a bad boy at school today behavior. I mean like taking shortcuts, cutting corners. Remember all those pictures I showed you earlier? Those are things. That shed that I showed you that had all that stuff all over the floor. You know why it has all that stuff all over the floor? Because somebody allows it to have all that stuff all over the floor. That's why. And the reality is, the same place where that picture was taken, I can take you to 3 separate sheds that look exactly the same. Someone says this is okay. Now, no one's going to come out and say, hey, here's what I want you to do. I want you to throw junk all over the place. I want stuff all over the floor. They don't say that. But the reality is like, well, that's okay with me. We tolerate stuff. And so, you know, my son has heard this over and over and over and over and over. You get what you tolerate. And if you tolerate it, you're going to get it. So don't expect to get anything other than what you actually tolerate. Now, on the flip side of that, there's another thing that I like to encourage people to think about. Not only do you get what you tolerate, you also get what you celebrate. Meaning, hey, when we celebrate things and we celebrate the way people do stuff, odds are they're probably going to do that same thing again. So, but let me give you an example on this, because maybe sometimes we celebrate the wrong things, especially from a work perspective. For a lot of us and a lot of folks, here's what we do. We look at stuff and we see it as, we gave you a job to do, we gave you a task to do, and you knocked it out of the park. Man, wow. We gave you a project that was going to take, we thought 5 days, and you got it done in 2. Way to go. And here's what we do. We celebrate results without necessarily looking at the behavior that produced those results. And what we can do there is we can reinforce bad behaviors by celebrating only results. So let me give you a real practical example of this that I'm fairly confident that has applied to you at some point in time in your life, all right? So one of 2 things are probably true, or maybe both of these things are true for you, all right? If you have a child, this is most likely true of you. And if you've ever been a child, this is probably most likely true of you. All right. Now, at some point in time, if you have a child, you probably have asked them to clean their room. And if you were a child, somebody probably asked you to clean your room. Right? Fair enough. Now, I'm going to take this example and I'm going to use my daughter as an example. All right. So my daughter's name is Annie, and currently right now Annie is 17 years old. So let's say I walk into Annie's room and it's just not clean. All right. There are water bottles all over the place. There are clothes all over the floor. Their bed's not made. There's trash in, like, it's just a disaster. And so I walk in there and I'm like, all right, Annie, this is not acceptable. Because we said earlier, you get what you tolerate. Not going to tolerate this. All right, not acceptable. I need you to clean your room. I'm going to give you an hour. All right, you got an hour to get this room clean. I'm coming back to check it out. And she says, all right, Dad. And so what Annie does is she looks around and she thinks to herself, you know, I really don't want to clean this room. This is not something that I want to do today. But I know if I don't, I'm probably going to get in trouble. So here's what she thinks. She's like, I got a really good idea. All right, all these clothes that are all over the place that I really don't want to wash and fold and hang up and all that stuff, I got a spot for them. They can go under the bed or the closet. I can put them in the closet, all right? Put them in the closet. I'll make the bed. I'll throw the trash away. Everything's going to look great, all right? So that's what she does. And then I walk back up the stairs, and I open the door, and I pop my head in the room. I look around, and I say, good job. Good job. Just think about that for a second. What did I just tell her? What did I just tell her? I just told her it is okay to cut corners. And in fact, I praised her for it. I celebrated it. Great job. And so what do you think she's going to do next time I ask her to clean her room? Same thing. Right? I never said put clothes in your closet and under your bed. I never said those words. But I just told her it was okay. And you think about that from the perspective of like an working environment. How often do we reinforce bad behaviors by celebrating the wrong stuff? We got to understand what it looks like to celebrate the right stuff and say, thank you for doing that. Thank you for getting that. Not just getting the job done. Thank you for getting the job done safely and meeting those expectations and staying at that green line. Because again, the green line is really, really important. Now, with all that being said, we're going back to our idea of not being enforced. So what I want to do is I want to give us a real little practical tip on, well, when maybe things aren't quite right like they're supposed to be, what should we do? Because we got to let people know, right? We just said we don't just let stuff slide. We don't just sweep it under the rug. We don't just turn a blind eye to it and say, that's on them, not on me. So we got to talk about this thing called feedback. Feedback is an important part of this whole process. All right? And so with this idea of feedback, got a couple questions I just want you to think about for a second. All right? First thing is, when should feedback be given? Well, probably you're thinking in your head, well, all the time. That might be a term that you got in your head. All the time, all the time, all the time. And yeah, I agree with you. And I think feedback should be given as quickly as we can. Here's the challenge with that. Sometimes we don't have the courage to give somebody some feedback. Or sometimes, I don't know if this ever happened to you, but I've talked to a lot of people. They walk into an annual review and they get blindsided by all the stuff they've been doing wrong all year. I mean, wouldn't you have wanted to know 3 months ago that there's something that I need to fix and change? So here's the deal. Like, we got to give that feedback as quickly and as safely as we possibly can. But with that in mind, we got to understand, well, what's the purpose of it? So in other words, why are we actually giving somebody some feedback to start with? And so with that in mind, there's a big overarching umbrella idea of why we're going to give feedback. Here's what I'm going to say. Feedback should be given with the intent of growth. All right? Growth and improvement, right? Now, with that in mind, there's two ways we do that. One of them is, hey, you're off track. I need to get you back on track. So in other words, that's not what we want. This is what we want instead when it comes to feedback, all right? Second idea behind feedback is, you're doing a good job and I feel like you deserve to know it. Both of those things foster growth and improvement in our people. Now, I'll also say this, both of those things are built around the idea that we care about the people that we're giving feedback to. Because what can very easily happen to you and me is we let emotions drive our conversations, And when we let emotions drive our conversations, that feedback isn't really built around the idea of growth. If we're being honest, we probably at some point in time have given somebody some feedback of, hey, I'm going to tell you this because I want you to know how dumb you are. I want you to know how stupid this was so you don't ever do this again. And I'm going to remind you of it over and over and over. And honestly, that's the purpose of the feedback that we might be giving someone. And so I just encourage us, like, before we give somebody some feedback, especially you're off track, need to get you back on track, check your heart. Check your heart. And what I mean by that is, where am I coming from on this and what am I trying to get out of this? Don't underestimate the power of a simple little pause button. Before we do it, hit that pause and say, what do I want to get out of this? Because if we truly care about our people, if we truly care about them getting better, it's probably going to come from a completely different place than if we just wanted to make them feel like an idiot. So we got to understand the purpose of feedback. Now, I got a useful little tool for you. I know everybody loves acronyms, right? Like you probably got 14,000 acronyms that you use on a daily basis. But here's a good one. And you can remember this one because you're going to like it, all right? Because you're going to get to think, I get to hit somebody with a fist. All right? Now, I did not tell you to punch somebody. Please understand, that's not part of it. You're not going to actually punch somebody. All right? But if you think of this FIST acronym when you're giving some feedback, it can really make sure that it is focused and we're talking about the things we need to talk about. All right? So F stands for facts. In other words, stick to the facts of what's going on. It's not a fact on how stupid somebody is. It's not a fact on how dumb somebody is. It's not a fact that somebody doesn't have common sense to fill in the blank. It's stick to the facts of the situation. What is going on? All right? The next thing is impact. So what we're talking about here is that green line that we talked about. Like, that green line's there for a reason, and the impact of not following that green line is you get hurt. And I don't want to see you get hurt. I don't want to see something bad happen to you. And so once we move past that, we get down here to S, meaning suggestion. So here's what's going to happen. Like, you and me, we're going to work together and we're going to come up with a solution to this problem. Here's the really cool thing about this one right here, because it gets skipped over a lot of times. Working together. Working together, here's what that does. It builds in accountability. Because if you and me came up with a solution together, it wasn't my idea. We worked this out together, and you said you were going to do this, so I shouldn't ever see this happen again. Like, we shouldn't have this issue or this problem again. It wasn't just me telling you to do something. And then the last thing here is timely. Meaning, we said this earlier, when should feedback be given? Well, we don't want to wait until we're comfortable to give somebody some feedback. Because what will happen is we're never going to be comfortable to give somebody some feedback. So it's got to be timely. I'll say this. Here's what happens a lot of times. And not so much anymore, but I still see it from time to time, especially in this idea of safety. A safety professional will show up on a job. They might not ever even get out of their truck, right? And people know they're there because they see their phone out taking pictures. Or maybe they do get out of the truck and they got an iPad or they got, a clipboard. And they sit there and they do all this stuff. They get back in their truck, never say a word to anybody about anything, and head out. And then, half an hour later or later on in the afternoon, crew gets back to the yard and somebody's waiting on them to have a conversation about all the things they were doing wrong. That's not real timely feedback. And in fact, I would say that individual who went through and did that cares nothing about those people that are working. And they didn't just tell those folks that, they told everybody that. So it is extremely important. Don't skip over the timely part of this. Feedback is important, but we've got to be willing to give that feedback as quickly as we possibly can. And here's kind of the wrap up on this. Like, well, who cares, Matt? Like, this all sounds great, and yeah, like green line and this, all this stuff, that and the other. The question I want to throw out there is like, well, why should we care? Like, what's the big deal? I mean, going back to the speed limit thing, like, what's the big deal? Like, we don't got to follow the rules. I mean, nobody follows the rules. Like, nothing bad's going to happen to you. The truth of the matter is, y'all, the reason why we should care, and especially in this industry, like I said, the vast majority of the folks that I get the opportunity to work with are people in the electric power industry. And the challenge with that is, if somebody gets hurt on the job, it might not be something like a paper cut. right? It might be something really, really significant, where somebody gets burned really bad, or somebody loses arms, or somebody doesn't get to go home at all. And when you start looking at all of this stuff, you start to understand how they all work together and the importance of this green line. This green line is extremely important, and we can't let the drift happen, because when the drift happens, eventually these two lines are going to meet each other. And like I mentioned earlier, every single one of these incidents that I've been a part of a team that investigated it, this was there. And I'll say this, it wasn't just one of these that was there. I'm going to throw this out there. In this industry, it is highly unlikely that that major event is ever going to happen because one person did one thing wrong. It's usually a series of events and a series of these things that unfortunately we've gotten real comfortable doing. So again, the whole intent of this green line is not just beat people over the head with rules. The whole intent of this green line is to ensure people go home. Because when we care about people, we care about seeing those people succeed, and we care about seeing those people leave work every day so they can come back to work. So, hey, I want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning in. Last little bit of encouragement, make sure that we're doing a good job of clearly communicating expectations and having those, because those types of expectations absolutely 100% can influence how the people that we work around every single day do their jobs, either in a positive way or in a negative way. Understand the role that you get to play in influencing the people you work with. Thank y'all. I appreciate you.